At the 48th Phyllis Schlafly Eagle Council, we sat down with Dr. Gina Loudon, a conservative media personality and co-chair of Women for Trump, and also author of Mad Politics, Keeping Your Sanity in a World Gone Crazy. Dr. Gina Loudon, wonderful to have you on American Thought Leaders.
So happy to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So, well, first of all, we have to talk about Women for Trump. You are co-chair of the group. Tell me about what you're up to now.
Just, making sure that all women in America understand that this president has had their backs from day one, that we have the lowest unemployment, it's record low unemployment for women, even cleared down to things like our national security and the fact that most of us aren't laying in bed worrying about terrorist attacks like we did before President Trump was the president. But President Trump isn't only fighting for women in America. The work that Ivanka has done all over the world for women. And so President Trump has been about equality and about respecting women really from day one. And we want to continue to make sure that all the women who want to be involved can be involved. And if they want to, what they can do is text the word empower to 88022. The word empower to 88022, and we will make sure that if we're going to be in their state and they want to come to a rally or be involved with any Women for Trump activities, that they'll be included. And so it's just really a big invitation for women who know that this president has been great and want to help keep America great.
So, from what I've heard, and actually even some people that I've spoken with, there's a number of women that might be interested, but they can't really socially do it. They don't feel comfortable
to
do it publicly. So how do you deal with that?
Well, we give them a sort of a home base, a safe space. If I were a leftist, that's what I'd call it. We give them a place where they can have a voice and they can make a difference in ways that, without necessarily being public. I have a really good friend in Florida who came to our last Women for Trump event, and she's a school administrator in a public school, and so she can't be sort of out there, obviously in her capacity, but she wants to make a difference in her own way. So we plugged her in with some of the things that she can do without necessarily being a public person, but to feel like she has impact for the future of her children and for the future of her own, well-being as well. So that's the kind of thing we're happy to try to help women plug in that way.
So actually you had a while ago now, I remember you had a CNN segment where things kind of went a bit off the rails. I recall you were called a racist.
Yeah.
I'll say it.
Yeah.
I don't like to repeat things like that. But that actually led to some pretty terrible outcomes actually subsequently.
Yeah.
And I've heard a little bit about that. I'm wondering if you could tell me a bit about what happened and how it's played out since.
Yeah, I have 5 children, and actually 3 of them ended up being attacked in one way or another because I was accused of being a quote-unquote racist, which is really funny if you knew my racial makeup, which I don't make a public case about, but I think people might be a little bit surprised. And anyway, I had responded in that segment. I have a son who's a minority child with Down syndrome. So if you want to encounter bigotry, come live a day in my life walking beside my son, who is a minority, who does have Down syndrome. And so I don't take kindly to being called a racist because I'm not, and I wasn't going to sit down for it. And so since I didn't, I think remaining calm, being diplomatic, understanding that someone actually just assumed your race, which is in and of itself kind of racist, but you just have to do that. And so I did. And but for that to be played out on my children, I think is it tells me a lot about who the left really is. They like to talk a lot about for the children, and they like to talk a lot about, being empathic to different sorts of people. But, the very things they talk about, they just don't practice. And so, my book Mad Politics, came out, and the president tweeted about it, which
Yes.
I was so happy about. But that meant that there was going to be a backlash because I did the horrible thing calling this president that they were trying to label a racist and an insane racist on top of it, I basically made the case in my book that actually he's one of the most stable, sound-minded people probably to ever occupy the Oval Office.
Right.
And I base that on facts and data. I've been a researcher my whole life. I have 4 degrees that study exactly this kind of thing. And I looked at his life. I looked at his birth order. I looked at his personality style, his leadership style, those sorts of things in my book. And I felt like I had a little place of authority to talk about it, and I'm glad the president agrees. But saying that to the left right now, when their whole goal from the beginning has been to paint him as something he's not, really creates a backlash that I think people like me who just aren't mean to people because of what they believe, I was a little caught off guard, and I kind of took it for a while. But then, when that happened, with my own children, I realized, that you have a certain point in your life where you have to really fight back. So now I'm encouraging conservatives to do that. I think you have to fight back because you can't take these accusations sitting down. And we are really such a melting pot at this point that the word racist essentially means, I don't know who said it, somebody here this weekend said something along the lines of, if they call you a racist, that means they've run out of arguments. And that's really what that means at this point.
But this had some pretty serious consequences from what I remember. Before you said 3 of your kids were attacked. 3 of your kids were attacked.
3 of them in 3 different, completely different contexts. Like, different days, different places, different groups of people, who I think are,
physically, verbally,
all physically and verbally also. I don't even think of verbal attacks as an attack because we all endure those all the time. If you're going to be a conservative, you're going to be verbally attacked, and your children are too. I'm one of those people that I never like to make a big deal out of death threat letters or anything like that, as long as they're targeted at me. And I have had a couple targeted also at my children. But this was different. This was really a defining moment for me where I decided, I'm not the only person this is happening to, and it's because of what I believe. It's because of what I'm fighting for, to the best of my ability. And you read my book, so in my book, Mad Politics, I talk about that my dad, who, by the way, is a minority, my dad has disagreed with me my entire life. He's a leftist activist. He's made no secret of the fact that all of his money will go to Planned Parenthood. And these are the groups of people that I battle every day in my life. But I love my dad. And we've always had very heated, but later loving conversations about what we believe and why. We're both terminally frustrated that I'm an only child, and my dad is also an only child, and he's obviously the only dad I have. And so we wish that the other person believed, but it's never come to a place where it's gotten between us. So
Right.
For me, I have a really hard time understanding why, if you and I disagree on something, we can't just discuss it and go, okay, well, that's all good. What do we agree on that we can fight for together? To me, that seems like a much more productive
Right.
thing to do than to go attack someone or to attack their children or to put out propaganda on them that is false, or to try and take their livelihood, as the left has done to me and as the left has done to many, frankly. But there are so many also amazing victories, and my children have learned so much that I think ultimately they will be stronger people for the things that they have survived, and you have to keep looking at the positive side, and you have to never back down. You have to never let them be the ones who try to intimidate you out of the process. I've been in this process since I graduated from my undergrad.
Okay.
I'm not going anywhere, and they're not going to make me go anywhere. And now they've just really taught my children to be exactly the same way as me. So they've created a bunch of little patriots they probably didn't mean to. So.
Speaking of your children, I was, one of the things that really struck me about your book, I think it was a while ago that I've read it now, frankly, but was about your adopted son, Samuel,
Mm-hmm.
who has Down syndrome. And it's just kind of a fascinating story about how, you decided you wanted to adopt a Down syndrome child right from the outset with your husband. And can you kind of speak to that whole process a little bit? I think our audience would really appreciate that.
Thank you. Well, it's one of my favorite things to talk about in the whole world, so thank you. Yeah, I had a really great year one year. I made the cheerleading squad, and all my prayers had been answered when you're in high school. And so I just said, you know what, to my mom, I want to offer my summer to God. I just want to do something to give back to him because I've had such a great summer. So my mom said, well, I just got asked to be, my mom was a nurse, and she said, I just got asked to be the nurse at this camp called Camp Wonderland in the Ozarks in Missouri here. And she said, would you like to come with me and be a camp counselor? Sure. So this would never happen today, but back in those days, things were much more innocent. And they said, you've got a cabin full of 6 men with Down syndrome.
Right.
That would never happen today, but that happened then, and it was innocent. And they became 6 of my best friends. They were in my wedding, and my husband, then when I met him, I brought him to Camp Wonderland with me, and it was just almost a given that we would adopt a child with Down syndrome.
Fascinating.
But it's not easy to do, and I explain why in my book, Mad Politics, but it's not easy, it's expensive, and here you are, in a lot of cases, someone like my family, taking on something that's kind of unknown from a health perspective. So you're going to have expenses that you may not expect with a typically developing child.
Right.
I won't say unhealthy, because my child is extraordinarily healthy and very happy and very bright, very bright. Intellectual thinking is off the charts, hard to measure, but really, really a smart kid, great sense of humor and all that. So I would say that. And I think because people with Down syndrome vary so largely, so you don't really know what you're getting. You don't know when you adopt a baby, it's a baby, so you don't know. And we found, my husband at the time was, I believe, made around $24,000 a year as a state representative here in Missouri, and adoption, $20,000 adoption for us at that moment was out of the question.
Right.
And it was very, very hard. My husband passed a tax credit bill to help people with special needs adoptions. But even with that tax credit bill, I would go to people and I'd say, would you loan me the money and then you can have the tax credits? Perfectly legal thing to do. And I couldn't find anyone to do it. So I decided that I wanted to have a foundation that helps people to adopt babies with Down syndrome. So one at a time, just a very quiet thing. Don't want to exploit any children ever, by putting them out there. But I think if people want to be part of that, it's called They All Have Names. And I did it in my mother's honor and in Samuel's honor. And adopting Samuel has been, I always say he is the belly laugh of our family. He makes it fun, he makes it funny, but he also helps you realize what really matters in life in ways that no person can lecture you, no book can teach you. Sam teaches us things every day. And this isn't me being a mom, and this isn't me. All of my friends with Down syndrome do this for me. And so if people would take time to get to know the community of people with disabilities, they would quickly realize that they do have gifts and they do have worth, and they have a lot to teach us as a society about compassion and just love and appreciating things. And that's why I wanted to adopt Samuel, and that's why I want to help other families also adopt children with special needs. And that's also why I want to fight for children like Samuel to have the right to be born in this country.
Right. So that is actually amazingly a question. Like, how does this argument look like right now in America? Around the right to be born for a Down syndrome child.
Well, Down syndrome is very often an exception, right? So if you have a diagnosis of Down syndrome, which, by the way, a lot of times those tests are wrong. I've had a positive triple test, with my youngest son, Bo, who has a genius IQ. And I had a positive triple test with him, and he's fine. So sometimes the tests are wrong. In the example of my birth mom, who is now also one of my best friends, who gave birth to my son Samuel, she was told when she got the diagnosis, she was told you should abort him, and she didn't want to, but she also didn't really have the means to take care of him at that time, and so she was thankful to find a family like ours. But I'll tell you, I sat every year on my birthday, I would call through every single Planned Parenthood in my state, and the rest of the year I would spend time calling Planned Parenthoods around the country, and I would try to tell them. I made a little booklet about our family, and open door, here's my email. If you have a person come into your Planned Parenthood who maybe has a hesitation about adopting their child, I'm not going to say anything about it. I'm just going to let them know that there's an alternative. And then finally, after 10 years of this, 10 years of making phone calls to Planned Parenthoods, trying to find one mom who was conflicted that I could adopt her baby, one of the Planned Parenthood workers finally said to me, you know, ma'am, we're not in the business of adoption. We do abortions. Really not interested in helping you. And that was a defining moment for me where I realized that if I was going to actually find a child who was slated for abortion to adopt, it was going to be through some pro-life organization, not through Planned Parenthood, that their heart was not about helping the babies in any way, shape, or form. Their heart was all about killing the babies and making sure that they were exterminated. We can never forget that it was a known eugenicist who wanted to correct the human race to Hitlerian proportions, right? Who founded Planned Parenthood. We can never forget that it is the most bigoted, racist, anti-person with disabilities, anti-woman organization ever founded, probably in the world, but certainly in the United States. And to my dying day, I will fight them with everything I have.
Fascinating. So tell me, how big is the community of folks who have children with Down syndrome? And is the foundation for just adopted children, or how does that work? I don't remember.
Yes, so my personal heart is to help families who want to adopt but don't know what those added expenses for education or health things might be with a special needs child of any kind. Of course, my preference is Down syndrome, but
Okay.
but I'm open, you know, and so just to help them with the expenses of the adoption itself. It can be anywhere between about a 10 and even up to $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 thing to adopt. So a lot of times you have a mom who just has a heart for children to begin with. She may have 5 or 6 children already, right? And so she already has an expense of raising children. And here she's willing to take on unknown, totally the unknown, which I guess we always do when we adopt, but with the special needs adoption, it's really unknown. And she's willing to take that risk, and it's such a burden on the family to pay those costs. So if we can remove or lessen those costs, that's going to be always my goal with They All Have Names Foundation. But also, I think, you know, getting the message out to women who may be pregnant with babies that have a special need. There are 300 families right now in the United States waiting to adopt a child with special needs.
Okay, wow.
People don't know that. I looked for 10 years.
And they're all connected with your foundation?
No,
Okay.
no, I'm just saying that's
that's
just
the
a
number.
fact. Yes,
Yeah.
I mean I do have people that would love to adopt. I've never before have I ever posted something about a baby available that I haven't had dozens of responses of families wanting them.
Fascinating.
So, but I want the moms too, like my birth mom, who is, like I said, I love her, so thankful for her. I want people like her to know when the hospital tells this woman from a foreign country who's here on a work visa, who has no means, no lawyer, no nothing, unless she wants to be here illegally, then I'm sure she has all kinds of that. But that wasn't her deal. She wanted to work hard and she wanted to come to America and do the right thing. And nobody told her that she didn't have to get an abortion. I want those moms to know that there are families who want those babies and they have a choice, a real choice, and they can put them up for adoption and they can go to a family like me. And if it's not me, then I will help them find the right family. Because they are waiting out there, and I want moms to know that, because right now somewhere between 70 and 90% of babies with Down syndrome are aborted. It was 90%, it's gone down just a little bit, I think because of social media and things like this and pro-life groups out there that have done a great job carrying that message.
Right.
But I want to be part of that because I want to help those women.
And tell me the full name of your foundation again, so people know where to
It's
where to
They All
contact.
Have Names Adoption.
They All Have Names.
They All Have Names. And then I write a lot about this, again, in my book, Mad Politics, which
Yes.
is available. And I write a lot, too, about how I came to support this president, who, by the way, loves my son, always goes out of his way when he sees my family in a crowd somewhere to make sure that my son feels loved and welcomed and special. And they do the thumbs up. And my Samuel, he's not very verbal, but he's very bright, and he can say Donald Trump. And he salutes the president every time the president does they do this little salute thing. So they have a cute bond that means a lot to me. And you know, this president really is fighting for children like Samuel. He has a big heart for them. And by the way, the disability thing that they always show, the left loves to show of him supposedly That is a lie. Just like supposedly he said there are good people on both sides of Charlottesville. That was a lie. He was talking about the monument. Just like saying Mexicans are rapists. He never said anything of the sort. If you watch it in context, in fact, that's how I opened my book, Mad Politics, was with that lie, because I think it's one of the most proliferated and obscene lies that's out there about our president today. But the disability lie is another one that's out there, and I want to do what I can to counter that, because I want moms and children with disabilities to realize that they have a president in President Trump who is going to fight for them.
Dr. Gina Loudon, such a pleasure to have you.
Such a pleasure to be here. Thank you.